Hello, I'm Jennifer Crawford. Thank you for joining us. Florida's legislative session wraps up in 3 weeks. The House approved a sweeping measure to eliminate homestead property taxes. Governor Ron DeSantis taking to Twitter, offering his support for property tax relief, but cautious about rushing a proposal. The governor saying, quote, "It's better to do it right than do it quick." Floridians question what will happen to essential services that rely on homestead property taxes for funding.
Stated differently, one person's exemption is another person's tax increase. And so I think that's important to remember when we're talking about property taxes, is that at the end of the day, this is about how we fund the essential services, how we pay the salaries of the people doing the work, creating the quality of life in cities. And I think it's important to remember that.
For more on the latest from Tallahassee, including Governor Ron DeSantis' priority of property tax relief for homeowners, we are joined by WGCU host and reporter John Davis. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
The big focus is the elimination of homestead property taxes. It has taken front and center stage in Tallahassee, and they've recently passed, the House has passed a measure, and it is a revised measure. There were multiple versions of this bill prior to the start of the legislature. They've now, at least the House has agreed on one, and they are moving that forward. Can you explain what the implications are of this?
Right. So House Joint Resolution 203 is the one that you're referring to. Last Thursday, this passed a floor vote in the House, largely along party lines. This specific proposal would eliminate non-school homesteaded property taxes, but incrementally. So it would increase the homestead exemption by about $100,000 a year for 10 years until that tax is effectively eliminated in 2037.
So it's a phased-in method versus an immediate cut.
Right. I think that's just intended to give these local governments who historically have relied on that property tax revenue to figure out what they're going to do differently over the course of a decade.
So the House passed it along party lines. What is going on in the Senate with regard to a measure that would cut property taxes?
So, yeah, it's been formally referred to the Senate. It's been given a committee assignment. But by and large, Senate leadership is not as aggressively gung-ho on this proposal as the House is. They're kind of taking a more cautious approach, as is Governor DeSantis. Senate President Ben Albritton has said, you know, they want to be thoughtful about this, and we don't want to pass something just to pass it if it might come back and bite us in the butt later with unintended consequences.
A measured approach is obviously a good idea, especially when it comes to something as significant as cutting billions of dollars in property taxes. There are many people concerned that this could affect funding for essential services. You had mentioned that there has been an amendment to the original measure. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so the House Joint Resolution that passed last week and has now gone to the Senate did include an amendment that would require local governments to continue to fund first responder services, firefighter, EMS, police, and to not drop those funding levels below a specific threshold. And that's based on the current budget year or the next budget year, whichever is higher. Just because that amendment is in there doesn't necessarily mean the funding is going to be there. This could end up, if this passes, just being an unfunded mandate for local governments because they're not going to have the property tax revenue they've had in the past, but they're still going to have a state mandate to keep these funding levels the same.
And this ultimately will be decided by the voters if it makes it that far. So go ahead and walk us through the process so we understand that this is still a long way off.
Still a long way off. Even if the Senate does approve this, you know, and then we have a bill that's passed in the next 3 weeks, it's going to be up to no voters in the November election, and it needs to get at least 60% voter approval. So I likely foresee, and this is already happening, that this is going to be a campaign issue leading up to November. Just this week, the Herald Tribune printed a editorial from a Republican candidate for Florida's 16th congressional seat, and he's very vocally against this whole property tax elimination idea.
I also know we had discussed the issue of Florida's property insurance market crisis, and this is something many citizens are very concerned about. What is going on in the legislature to help with this?
Nothing that I can see. Democrats have been raising this as their opposition to this as well, saying that the property insurance market crisis is actually a bigger issue, and that is supported by data. There's a recent poll from the nonpartisan Florida Policy Institute that showed almost 2/3 of Florida voters say reducing property insurance costs should be a bigger priority than reducing property taxes. It was really only 32% of poll respondents who thought that the property tax issue should be the bigger priority. There's even a bill that was introduced by Democratic Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith that was aimed at addressing sort of the lack of transparency and how insurance companies are reporting profits versus losses. And this was based on a 2022 report that initially was kept from the public and lawmakers that showed 53 insurance companies between 2017 and 2019 were reporting losses in the hundreds of millions of dollars. But then these affiliated companies were posting profits of like $1.8 billion. So just kind of showing it was a bit of a shell game. They could manipulate the numbers to try to get lawmakers to pass reforms that would benefit the industry, as opposed to reforms that would actually benefit the people having to pay the property insurance costs.
So hopefully that will get addressed at some point.
The bill hasn't moved at all. So
Goodness.
I don't think it will.
Goodness. Well, I do know that lawmakers do need to work out a budget. They are still, I believe, about $1 billion off, and we don't have an agreement yet, and that would need to happen before March 13th, correct, to pass a budget?
Well, that would need to happen by March 13th in order for session to end on time, but that's not necessarily a given. You remember in 2025, the session extended an additional 45 days just because they were unable to hammer out a budget. So even if session ends on time, we're not done with the legislative session this year. There's already a special session Governor DeSantis has called in April to deal with congressional redistricting exclusively. And if nothing passes by March 13th on property taxes, there's nothing stopping the governor from calling another special session because, again, their end date isn't the end of session. Their deadline is the November election. So they've got all summer to try to figure out something they can get on the ballot.
There is so much work to be done. Is there anything else that you're tracking that you would like to share with us in the next 2 weeks that's going on in Tallahassee? I know AI, we had discussed a little bit about a measure where they were looking at regulating AI.
One of Governor DeSantis's priorities is the so-called AI Bill of Rights. This has just been a little controversial, not because of what it wants to do. I mean, everybody's trying to get ahead of this rapidly advancing technology in terms of creating a regulatory framework, but doing it on a state-by-state basis as opposed to on the federal level is going to be a tough sell.
There is so much to think about and to work on. Our lawmakers have a lot of work cut out for them.
They sure do.
And we will be following and tracking all the changes going on in Tallahassee.
All right, thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you, John Davis, for joining us today.